Hello everyone. Today we're going to talk about something no one really wants to say out loud. But I will. Picture this. 4:47 a.m. My phone's been off since midnight. The coffee's lukewarm because I forgot it while reading an article on lunar gravity. There's a hum in my ears. Not from anything in the room, but from the silence that's so thick it almost feels physical. The kind of silence that makes you question your own name. That's where this started. That's where all of it starts. Because success, it doesn't walk in with fanfare. It doesn't even knock. It waits in the corners, usually where no one else dares to go. And for me, that place was loneliness. You probably won't survive this if you think you can take everybody with you. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you really like what I do here. Let me know in the comments. Where are you watching from and what time is it for you? Now let's get comfortable, and let's get started today. No one tells you that the path to something great starts with becoming unrecognizable to your own tribe. I remember that first year vividly. Not because of what I achieved, I didn't achieve much, but because of what I lost. Attention, calls, invites, the warm validation of being wanted in a group chat. They say humans are social creatures, and that's true for average days. But for above-average lives, you become a ghost. A self-imposed one. That's the price. The silence I mentioned earlier, it's not just about being physically alone. It's about emotional withdrawal from norms. Let's start with a hard truth. If you're always surrounded by people, you're not doing something original. It wasn't depression. It was detachment. I was rewiring myself to stop craving applause from people who weren't building anything. The loneliness didn't feel like punishment. It felt like purification. I started to see things more clearly, mostly about myself. For instance, I realized I hated being average. Not because I'm better than anyone else, but because mediocrity felt like clothes that didn't fit. A fun, strange truth. Crows have funerals. When one dies, a group gathers around and studies what happened. It's like they're learning. I mention this because that was me. Standing over the death of my social identity, quietly observing. People talk about finding themselves. But when you really find yourself, you often discover you've outgrown the life you're in. There's an open academic debate on whether solitude enhances or deteriorates cognition long-term. Some studies show isolation weakens memory. Others suggest it boosts problem-solving. In my case, it did both. I forgot birthdays, but I figured out the rhythm of my mind. I got comfortable with eating alone. I walked without headphones. I journaled like a Victorian widow. The first month, I tried to bring friends along. I'd send them book suggestions, podcast links, drop cryptic little breadcrumbs about the projects I was sketching. Most smiled politely. A few ghosted. One even said, "You're acting weird lately." I was acting like someone who saw behind the curtain. The world's loudest energy is distraction. And friends, even the good ones, can become distractions when your inner compass shifts. It doesn't make them villains. It just makes your path incompatible with theirs. The part no one warns you about is the silence gets louder before it gets clearer. By week 6, I started talking to myself out loud. Not in a crazy way, I think, just in little check-ins. How we feeling? Or that sucked, huh? It sounds strange, but it became a form of companionship. A tiny human intelligence hack. Externalizing thoughts makes them easier to sort. You'd be surprised how much clutter lives in your head unchecked until you try explaining it out loud to yourself. One night, I was sketching out a project idea. Midnight, fridge humming like a spaceship. I had no feedback loop.
No mentor. No deadline.
Just an idea and a dry pen. And I felt something click. Like I didn't need anyone's permission anymore. The loneliness had turned from enemy to ally. It no longer echoed with questions like, "Why aren't they here?" It hummed with a different tone. Because they're not supposed to be. If you're nodding along, if you feel this, I have news for you. You've already started. Because the first gate is loneliness. And once you walk through it willingly, the world starts to rearrange. You notice things others miss. You catch the hesitation in someone's voice when they talk about their dreams. You recognize the hunger in your own reflection. I won't lie and say it gets easier, but I will say it gets clearer. And clarity? That's better than comfort. Joke time. You know what I realized? Becoming successful is like ordering the weirdest thing on the menu. Everyone stares like you've lost your mind, until it arrives and smells like the best decision in the room. And if you need a laugh, I once spent 3 hours convincing myself I didn't need social media anymore. The next day, I posted a picture of my breakfast. We backslide. We're human. But don't let the occasional scroll or lonely night make you think you're off course. You're just adjusting your altitude. We spend so much of our lives trying to be understood. But in this phase, it's better to understand yourself. The only person who has to believe in your story right now is you. The others can catch up later or not. Discipline isn't sexy. That's the thing no one dares to admit on those shiny vision board Instagram posts. We love the word. We post it in neon fonts and pair it with photos of six-packs and color-coded planners. But what it actually feels like, that's something else entirely. For me, discipline didn't start with a plan. It started with a breakdown, not a dramatic one. No tears, no violins, just a quiet Sunday where I realized I was tired of negotiating with myself, tired of letting the maybe tomorrow part of my brain win. There's a moment when motivation dies, and what's left is either obsession or inertia.
chose obsession.
It started embarrassingly small. I set alarms, placed post-it notes everywhere, even taped a handwritten sign on the bathroom mirror that said, "Don't trust your feelings before 9 a.m. Still have that note. It's wrinkled and coffee-stained and 100% right. You want to know a human intelligence fact? The prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for decision-making, is weaker when we first wake up. That's why people hit snooze. That's why people sabotage themselves before breakfast. So I started removing my own decisions. That's real discipline, not waking up at 5 a.m. to meditate on a mountaintop. Setting your shoes by the door so your 5 a.m. self has no excuse. And yeah, it was obsessive. I tracked my water intake like it was a video game. I memorized morning routines of Olympic swimmers just to feel guilty enough to skip mine less. I wrote down my goals in the back of old receipts and stuck them under my laptop like landmines of guilt. But the joke I tell myself now, I became so obsessed with structure that I once timed how long it took me to chew a banana. There's a phrase in open academic debate that always stuck with me. Is discipline a finite resource? Some researchers argue willpower gets depleted like fuel. Others say it regenerates when attached to purpose. I say it mutates, turns into something primal when you want the outcome badly enough. There's nothing cool about practicing a skill when you suck at it. It's not TikTok-worthy to write 1,000 words that never see the light of day. No one claps for consistency. But here's the twist. Consistency doesn't care if you feel like it. That's the magic. That's the brutality. After 2 months of living like a monk with a smartphone, my life didn't transform. But I did. I noticed things. I stopped wasting energy deciding whether or not to do the work. The decision had already been made. Discipline isn't the thing that shows up when you're feeling inspired. It's the skeleton that holds you up when inspiration's gone. That became my new mantra. Hive over high. Because you'll learn fast, discipline has no reward. Not at first. In fact, it makes your life less fun. You'll turn down dinners. You'll delete apps. You'll wake up early on days when the sky begs you to stay in. And no one will applaud. They'll actually roll their eyes. Someone once told me, "You're trying too hard." And I laughed. Because yes, I was. Intentionally. Trying hard is how the rust falls off. I had to retrain my brain to crave repetition. And you know what helped? Predictable things. Folding laundry. Drinking the same smoothie every day until it became a symbol of, I don't negotiate with myself. I even gave my habits names. Like nighttime ninja mode for the 10-minute ritual I did before bed. Phone off. To-do list written. Clothes set out. Was it corny? Yes. Did it work? Also yes. The secret, like, discipline is a language. And like any language, fluency only comes with immersion. You can't dip in and out. You can't speak it only on weekends. You either live in it, or you're just visiting. And when you really live in it, weird things happen. You start resenting weekends because they break your flow. You stop needing praise because your own progress becomes addictive. You stop hoping things get easier and start becoming the kind of person who can handle harder things. That's when you know discipline has worked its way under your skin. One night, I was at a party, rare for me by then, and someone said, "You've changed. You don't talk much anymore." And I smiled, because discipline had made me quiet, focused, less interested in chatter, more interested in chapters. And it's strange, but the more structure I created, the freer I felt. It's like building a cage, but realizing you're the only thing wild enough to fly through its bars. Want another laugh? I once turned down a date because I hadn't finished my non-negotiable task for the day. That task? Finishing a single paragraph. Romance lost to grammar. But that's how seriously I took it. That's how seriously you need to take it. Because obsession is just another word for care. Deep, radical, uncomfortable care for something most people treat casually. Discipline won't make you famous. It won't make you happy. But it will make you inevitable. It will make the dream impossible to unsee. And the work impossible to abandon. If motivation is a matchstick, discipline is the sun. Let it burn through your excuses until nothing's left but what must be done. You know what no one really prepares you for? The way your glow-up annoys people. Not publicly. Not with fireworks or confrontations. It's quieter than that. Like how plants bend away from a draft they don't like. That's what it felt like. Watching my circle twist, shrink, and turn just enough for me to feel it. I didn't think I was doing anything offensive. I was just growing. I was changing my schedule, saying no to things, swapping out gossip for goals. But the vibe shift was nuclear. People will support you until you start to outpace them. It's wild. You expect hate from strangers, but it's the people who used to sit across from you in the booth, split fries with you, laugh at inside jokes. Those are the ones who start to pull back first. The thing is, when you glow up, you don't just upgrade your habits, you upgrade the mirror. And suddenly, people have to see themselves in that reflection. Some don't like what's staring back. Human intelligence fact. We're wired for social mimicry. We unconsciously mirror the habits and moods of our close network. So when you stop mirroring, when you shift into something sharper, more focused, it messes with that equilibrium. You become a disruption, even if you don't say a word. That's the secret tension no one wants to talk about. Your glow-up might be someone else's wake-up call, and not everyone wants to be awake. I remember one moment that hit me like a sucker punch. I had finally hit a milestone, something I had worked months for. I texted a few close friends. One replied, "Oh cool." That was it.
No emoji.
No follow-up. Just digital beige. And listen, I'm not needy. But when you stop cheering for me entirely, I notice. It's not that they hated me. It's that they didn't recognize me anymore. And people fear what they don't recognize. Open academic debate time. There's discussion around whether social groups evolve with personal development or remain fixed based on shared histories. My life is case study number 413 in favor of the latter. Because as I changed, my history kept getting in the way. You're different now. You're always working. You used to be more fun. I didn't fight those accusations. I just let them echo. Because they were right. I was different. And not everyone's supposed to come with you when you change. That's what I felt like. Naked under a rock, waiting for the new version of myself to harden. And yes, it was lonely. Again. But this time the loneliness was tinged with awareness. I could see what was happening. I wasn't angry at the people who pulled back. I understood it. When you break free from the rhythm of the group, you become the offbeat. And not everyone likes dancing to that. I used to explain myself. I used to send long texts saying things like, "Hey, I'm just trying to be better. Hope you get it." But over time, I stopped explaining. You should never have to justify evolution. Here's the thing, growth doesn't make you better than anyone. But it does make you different. And different is all it takes for people to treat you like a stranger. There was one night. I'll never forget it. I was walking home alone after a late gym session. The sky was this deep navy blue, stars buried behind smog, and I passed by a bar I used to love. Inside, I saw my old group at our usual table. Same laughter, same drinks, same inside jokes. But I kept walking, not because I wasn't invited, but because I didn't belong anymore. That's the quiet heartbreak of leveling up. You don't lose people in dramatic explosions. You just stop getting the "you coming tonight?" texts. And if I'm being real, that stung more than any insult. But I held that pain like a torch. Because if you dim your light to make others comfortable, you'll burn out before you ever see the sunrise. I started building new connections. Slowly, carefully. People who didn't flinch when I talked about spreadsheets and dopamine hacks. People who got excited about 5 a.m. like it was Disneyland. And let me be clear, this wasn't about finding better people. It was about finding aligned people. Folks on their own path who weren't threatened by mine. If your friends only celebrate your past and not your future, you've outgrown them. Joke break? Alright, one of my old friends once said, "Not everything has to be about growth." I said, "That's literally what plants and people do. You want me to be a chair?" He didn't laugh. I did. Growth makes some people uncomfortable because it makes them question their stasis. And not everyone wants to peel back their own curtain. So what do? You keep shining. Even if it blinds the ones you once held close. And maybe one day they'll put on their own sunglasses and catch up. Or maybe they won't. And that's okay too. Because the people who really get it, they'll find you in the quiet. They'll show up, not with confetti, but with commitment. They'll speak your new language fluently because they've been learning it too. Until then, glow up anyway. Comfort's tricky. It doesn't show up with a neon sign that says, "Hey, I'm here to sabotage you." No, it's much sneakier than that. It whispers, "You've earned this. You deserve to relax a little." And that's how it gets you. At first, I thought I was evolving, cutting out the chaos, creating structure, treating myself better. But what I didn't realize was that comfort had started sliding into the driver's seat while I was too busy celebrating balance. I got a bit soft. Not physically, though. Yes, I did skip a few gym sessions, but mentally. I stopped taking the stairs when the elevator was working. Stopped pushing for that extra hour of work. I even let a few tasks roll into tomorrow territory. And when tomorrow came, they somehow became next week. You know that human intelligence fact? The brain is designed to seek efficiency, not greatness. That means the moment something starts to feel easy, we default to autopilot. We're wired to coast. Comfort feels like progress because it soothes. But in reality, it's a slow sedative. At first, it's the big things. Skipping one commitment, flaking on one promise. Then it gets microscopic. You start choosing the warm hoodie over the cold walk. The mediocre podcast over the demanding book. The harmless scroll instead of the difficult journal entry. And the scariest part? No one calls you out on it. Why would they? You're functioning. You're not failing. You're just drifting. There's an open academic debate about whether comfort and safety are neurologically indistinguishable. Some say the brain doesn't know the difference. To the nervous system, a cozy couch and a job well done feel almost the same. That should terrify you. Terrified me. I realized I had to reverse engineer friction back into my life. So I did something weird. I made a discomfort menu. Legit, it was a Google Doc with items like, take a cold shower, walk 10,000 steps without music, say no to sugar for 72 hours, read 30 pages before touching phone. Why? Because I needed to remind my brain that growth isn't soft. It's sharp. Same thing with progress. If you're still, you're starving. I started sleeping on the floor once a week. Not because I had to, but because I needed to remind myself that comfort was a choice. And choices have consequences. At night, I'd stare at the ceiling and think, what part of my routine has become a trap? That's a brutal question. But it led to even more brutal answers. Like, I was working just enough to feel busy, but not enough to feel proud. I was learning just enough to sound smart, but not enough to be changed. I was living just enough to not feel dead, but not enough to feel fully awake. You ever touch your phone before your feet hit the floor in the morning? I did. For weeks. Until I realized I was living through screens before I was even vertical. That's when I knew my comfort had turned carnivorous. It was feeding on my edge. So I declared war. Not on rest, not on joy, but on excessive ease. I started saying no to shortcuts. I picked the harder route on purpose, even if it took longer. I deleted all food delivery apps for a month. I prepped meals like a doomsday prepper with a crock pot. It was ridiculous and amazing. And yeah, I got mocked. You're being extra. Just relax. Why make things harder than they have to be? Because ease had made me soft. And softness isn't always safety. Sometimes it's self-sabotage in a bathrobe. You know the saying, don't get too comfortable? It's not a warning. It's a diagnosis. I noticed something else. The people I admired, the ones who really made things happen, they ran toward friction. They sought it out. They made discomfort a lifestyle. One guy I knew trained for marathons by running in boots. Another used to practice public speaking by talking to strangers in elevators. And me? I turned my own life into a low-level obstacle course. Not extreme, just enough resistance to remind me that ease doesn't build legacy. You don't grow in soft beds. You grow in tension, in the stretch, in the moment your brain screams, "This is dumb," and your spirit whispers, "Keep going." Funny story. I once sat on the floor in a freezing kitchen reading a book because I knew it would annoy me. And guess what? I remembered every page. Discomfort etches. And if I had to sum up the lesson, it's this. If your life doesn't have a little friction, you might not be moving fast enough. We're taught to chase comfort as the end goal. But success, real success, lives just beyond it. Joke time? Here goes. I told a friend I was voluntarily giving up sugar, and they asked, "For how long?" I said, "Until I stop craving it." They looked at me like I joined a cult. Maybe I had the cult of growth. Enrollment's free, but the dues are steep. So here's what I leave you with. Don't trust things that feel too easy for too long. Don't accept silence from your inner alarm. And whatever you do, don't make a home in the comfort zone. You weren't built to live there. Just pass through. Briefly. Say thanks. Take the lesson. Then keep climbing. There's no one else in the room. Just you, your reflection, and a version of yourself you're not sure you like. That's what the mirror becomes after a while. Not a place to fix your hair, but a battlefield where truth punches harder than failure ever could. I used to avoid mirrors unless I was leaving the house. Even then, it was a glance. Enough to check for toothpaste on my face or crust in my eyes. Nothing deeper. Nothing meaningful. But when I started working on myself, really working on myself, the mirror changed. It stopped being about how I looked and started being about what I couldn't unsee. The mirror doesn't lie, but it also doesn't offer solutions. It just stares back, silently asking, "So, this is who you've chosen to be?" I once stood in front of it for 10 minutes, not checking my clothes, not posing, just standing. The longer I stared, the more uncomfortable I got, because I couldn't pretend anymore. I couldn't gaslight myself into thinking I was doing my best. I wasn't, and the mirror knew. There's a human intelligence fact here. Studies show we actually process our own faces differently than we do others. We're hypercritical. Our brain picks out asymmetry, microflaws, tension in the eyes. But you know what that means? The mirror is the most honest mentor you've got. And it doesn't coddle you. The first time I said something out loud in the mirror, it was accidental. I muttered, "Get it together." Then I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was true, and raw, and weirdly powerful. So I kept doing it, talking to myself like a coach, not a cheerleader. A coach. You wasted today. Fix that. You're scared of success. Admit it. Why haven't you started that thing you keep thinking about? And sure, it sounded nuts, but it worked, because saying it out loud makes it harder to ignore. That's one of those overlooked tools. Verbalizing shame doesn't make it worse. It makes it manageable. Open academic debate. Is self-talk more effective when positive or critical? Some psychologists push the kindness over everything narrative. Others argue that honest, even harsh, self-feedback leads to change faster. I fell somewhere in the middle, compassionate but direct, like a therapist with a stopwatch. The mirror became my truth chamber. It's where I confronted the weight I hadn't lost. The book I hadn't finished. The time I said I was too tired when really I was just too scared. Eventually, it became a ritual. Wake up, wash face, make eye contact with myself, ask the hard question of the day. Sometimes it was, what are you avoiding? Sometimes it was, who are you doing this for? And sometimes, just, why are you lying to yourself again? And let me tell you, the mirror doesn't blink, doesn't look away, doesn't give you an escape route. There was a week where I skipped the mirror. I told myself it was because I was too busy. But really, I didn't want to face what I knew I'd see. Someone making excuses, someone slipping. That's when I knew the habit had power. Because anything that makes you that nervous to skip is probably essential. I started journaling right after the mirror talks. Just 5 minutes. No structure, no pressure. Just raw download from whatever that glass interrogation stirred up. Some days it was fire, other days just fog. But all of it was me, unfiltered. We get used to outsourcing feedback. We want likes, reactions, affirmation. But the mirror doesn't follow you. It doesn't subscribe. It doesn't clap. It just knows. And here's something else, your reflection changes based on how honest you're being. When you're aligned, your eyes soften. When you're fronting, your jaw tightens. I saw it. I tracked it. I learned to decode my own facial tension like a lie detector. I had this one moment, barefaced, hoodie on, no music, just fluorescent bathroom light, and I caught myself almost crying. Not from sadness, but from realization. I was stronger than I thought. Not louder, not better, just finally real. That's the gift the mirror gives. Brutal honesty that eventually builds trust. Because once you start being honest in the mirror, you can't help but bring that honesty into the rest of your life. Into your friendships, your habits, your inbox. You start deleting texts you don't mean, saying no faster, asking for help more directly, because you've practiced the hardest part, facing yourself. There's no shortcut here. You either confront or you coast. And once you choose confrontation, the game changes. Joke time. I once flexed in the mirror just to see what progress looked like. Then immediately burst out laughing because I looked like a dehydrated broomstick. Progress, baby. One awkward flex at a time. But hey, that broomstick could do 10 more push-ups than last month. And that's what the mirror reminded me of. Not perfection, not performance, but progress. So look.
Stare.
Cringe. Grit your teeth. Speak your truth. The mirror isn't your enemy. It's your accountability partner. The kind that doesn't let you lie, even when you really want to. There's a certain thrill in being underestimated. It's like showing up to a high-stakes poker game in a wrinkled hoodie, only to walk away with everyone's chips and their dignity neatly folded in your back pocket. It's one of the few unfair advantages you can't buy, being invisible until it's too late for them to stop you. When I first started building, grinding, shifting gears, people didn't say much. Some smirked. Some nodded politely. Most ignored it altogether. It was beautiful, because I realized in that underestimation, there was freedom. You get to move quietly when no one's watching. And when people don't expect much from you, they don't get in your way. You become background noise. That's what I was, background noise at barbecues, at birthday dinners, in group chats. Still working on that little project? Still waking up early like a psycho? Still pretending to be productive? Yes, and hell yes, because being underestimated gave me time. It gave me room to make mistakes in private, to sharpen my tools in the dark, to fail without fanfare. There's a human intelligence principle called the Pygmalion effect, where higher expectations lead to better performance. But there's a darker sibling, the golem effect, where low expectations lead people to aim lower, but only if you believe the story they're telling. I didn't. Instead, I made it my fuel. Because when people look past you, you can sneak right past them. I remember pitching my first serious idea to a friend. They blinked slowly, smiled politely, and said, "Sounds ambitious." Translation: "You probably won't pull this off." They weren't mean. They were just projecting their own ceiling. So I built in silence. For months.
No updates.
No grand reveals. I treated myself like a stealth startup. Minimum noise, maximum obsession. That became the mood. Pistol shrimp energy. There was a day I rolled out a new launch, tiny, but meaningful to me.
No applause.
No coverage. Just results. Quiet, measurable, undeniable. The same people who hadn't asked me a question in months suddenly popped up. "Oh, I didn't know you were doing all that. I had no idea you were serious about this." Funny how vision looks like delusion until the receipts show up. But I wasn't mad. Honestly, I liked it that way. There's power in catching people off guard. And here's the twist. Being underestimated also made me less afraid to fail. When no one's expecting fireworks, you're free to fumble. That freedom is priceless. There's an open academic debate on whether external validation is necessary for sustainable motivation. I tested that in real time. The answer? No. Not when you've been ignored long enough to start trusting your own scoreboard. I learned to build without applause, to clap for myself when the work was done, to celebrate milestones like secret rituals. There's something deeply satisfying about winning when no one saw you coming. It's like showing up to a marathon no one even knew you entered, and casually crossing the finish line with coffee in hand. Joke time? I once heard someone say, "Wait, you're still doing that thing?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm still doing that thing that's now paying my rent." They blinked like I'd cast a spell, because they don't expect you to win when you start quietly. They expect you to fade. So let them sleep on you. Let them smirk. Let them write you off. Every eye that looks past you becomes a window you don't have to worry about. The best moves are made in silence. The best transformations happen behind closed doors. You know who taught me the most about this? People who doubted me. They gave me the gift of low expectations, and in return, I gave them the shock of a fully formed version of myself they didn't even recognize. I remember one moment vividly. I was sitting in a meeting, across from someone who used to laugh when I talked about building something meaningful. They were now pitching me, asking for input. I nodded, smiled, didn't say a word about the past. Didn't need to, because the work speaks. Always. The more I achieved, the quieter I became. Not out of modesty, but because I no longer needed anyone to get it. I just needed the results to keep stacking. I didn't care about proving people wrong. I cared about proving myself right. That's the real shift. You stop looking over your shoulder to see who's watching. You start looking ahead, eyes locked on the next summit. Let them underestimate. Let them forget. Let them assume you're average. Because one day, they'll scroll past your name, double take, and wonder how they missed it. Somehow they didn't miss it. They just weren't listening when you were whispering. And by the time you're loud, you don't even need to be. Success looks boring. That's the paradox that broke my brain the first time I hit a goal I'd been dreaming about for years. I expected fireworks, music swelling in the background, maybe a call from the universe saying, "You did it." But instead, I looked around the room and realized it was 6:42 p.m. I hadn't eaten all day, and I still needed to do laundry. No one tells you that success, real success, often feels anticlimactic. You grind, you push, you sacrifice, and then when you arrive, it looks suspiciously like another Tuesday. The thing is, the work that builds success is not thrilling. It's not cinematic. It's not even particularly photogenic. It's just relentless. I had imagined the big moments would change me, that I'd feel taller, shinier, wiser. But they didn't. What changed me were the tiny, repetitive actions I did when no one was watching. Let me share a comforting thought about human intelligence. The brain adapts quickly to new stimuli. That's called hedonic adaptation. It's why lottery winners often return to their baseline happiness, and why reaching a goal doesn't create lasting euphoria. So when I finally got there, wherever there was, I didn't celebrate. I cleaned my desk, sent 2 emails, wrote another line of code. Then I went to bed early, and it hit me. I had confused intensity with consistency. I thought I needed to push harder. But really, I needed to keep showing up the same way every day, even when it felt dull. When people ask me what success feels like, I say, it feels like doing the same thing you were doing when no one cared, just with better lighting. No dramatic plot twist. Just flow. One day, I sat down and realized that my calendar had become eerily identical from week to week. Wake, move, create, reflect, sleep, rinse, repeat. At first, that scared me. Routine felt like a cage. But then I realized the routine wasn't prison. It was proof. Proof I had found a rhythm that worked. Proof I didn't need chaos to feel alive anymore. There's an open academic debate around the role of novelty in maintaining motivation. Some argue we need fresh stimuli to stay engaged. Others say deep mastery comes from repetition. I say, boredom is a feature, not a flaw. Because underneath that boredom, that's where mastery lives. Success started to feel like brushing my teeth. Necessary. Unremarkable. Daily. About me, I once worked 40 straight days, hit a major milestone, and treated myself to a new notepad. Not a vacation. Not a Rolex. A $5 notepad from a stationery store that smelled like printer ink and lost ambition. And you know what? Felt amazing. Because when the work becomes the reward, you stop chasing shiny things. I used to fantasize about wild celebrations, champagne, neon lights, slow-mo high fives. But when the moment came, I wanted silence. On up. Maybe a walk. That's it. Turns out, success doesn't demand spectacle. It demands stability. There was a week where everything was clicking. Money flowing, projects thriving, inbox full of opportunities. And all I wanted was for no one to call me so I could finish my reading schedule. That's when I knew I wasn't chasing dopamine anymore. I was chasing depth. Quick story. I had just wrapped a deal I never thought I'd land. I walked into the kitchen, made toast, and stood barefoot on cold tiles thinking, this is it. And yes, it was it. And that was enough. Because when you fall in love with the process, the results become byproducts. The only dramatic thing left was how undramatic it all was.
No announcement.
Just alignment. I stopped needing to prove anything. Stopped needing to explain. I just did the work. Showed up. Tracked numbers. Sent thank you emails. Recycled receipts. And here's something wild. When your life is no longer powered by adrenaline, you sleep better. Your skin clears up. Your creativity deepens. You stop performing. You start existing. The work isn't glamorous. Neither is growth. Most of the time, you'll feel like a well-oiled ghost haunting your own routine. But every now and then, you'll look up and realize you're further than you've ever been. That's success. Not the noise. Not the party. But the quiet click of another piece falling into place. That's the thing about building something real. You don't always see the moment it arrives. You just realize you're not struggling anymore. You look around and think, wait, this is working. And then you keep going. Because the real ones don't stop when it works. They stop when it's done. So yeah, success looks boring. It smells like coffee and printer paper. It sounds like keyboard clicks and the hum of your brain refusing to give up. Don't be fooled. The flash fades. But the craft, that stays. You want to know what nearly killed my momentum? Praise. Not failure, not criticism, praise. That warm, buttery voice telling me, wow, you're doing so well. You don't expect it to be dangerous. But it is. It slips in under the radar. You hear a compliment, and your shoulders relax. Your edge softens. And before you realize it, you've traded discipline for dopamine. I remember the first time I got real feedback. I mean the kind that cuts. I had sent a friend a draft of something I'd worked on for weeks. They wrote back, it's good, but it's not honest. That shattered me. My first instinct? Defensiveness. I wanted to write a 10-paragraph rebuttal, explaining my creative direction. But I didn't. I sat with it. And deep down, I knew they were right. We love praise because it validates what we've already done. But feedback? That tells you what still needs work. And that's the part no one wants to hear. This is something fascinating about human intelligence. Neurologically, praise and rewards light up the same brain regions as sugar or drugs. Criticism, on the other hand, activates the brain's threat response. But you need both. You can't grow without tension. Praise makes you feel safe. Feedback makes you better. There's this weird thing that started happening. The more praise I got, the slower I moved. I'd get 5 compliments and suddenly think I could coast for a week. I realized I had to flip the reward system. I stopped letting compliments be endpoints. I started treating them like weather reports. Nice to notice, but totally irrelevant to the direction I was going. And look, I'm not saying compliments are bad. They're not. They're fuel. But if you let them be the only fuel, you're setting yourself up for a crash. I started hunting for feedback like a detective looking for fingerprints. Be brutal. Tell me what's missing. What felt off to you? At first, people hesitated. Everyone's scared of offending. But once I made it clear I wasn't asking for validation, I was asking for evolution. Something shifted. My work started improving faster. Not incrementally, exponentially. There's an open academic debate on whether negative feedback works better than positive reinforcement. Most agree that how it's delivered matters. But I think it's more than that. I think the key is what you believe the feedback means. I decided it meant, "You're worth fixing." That changed everything. I remember sending a revised version of that same project to the friend who had called it dishonest. This time they replied, "There you are. No trophy, no confetti, just clarity." And that was better. You know what else I did? I created a feedback folder. Anytime someone said something hard but true, I saved it. Reviewed it weekly. Not to shame myself, but to remind myself what growth sounds like when it's real. Joke time. I once got a 2-star review on a thing I launched. I cried for 10 minutes, then printed it out and taped it to my wall with the heading, Motivation Station. It worked. I've since upgraded to a framed copy. We're so conditioned to chase approval. We forget that correction is a form of love. 2. A deeper one. One that doesn't just pat you on the back but hands you a map. I started craving it. Not in a masochistic way, but in a tell me what I can't see kind of way. The compliments? Those became like elevator music. Pleasant but ignorable. The feedback? That became symphonic. One day, I had a mentor look at my progress and say, "You've grown, but you're still playing small." That lit a fire in me, because it was both praise and a challenge. A reminder that I wasn't done, that I might never be done. I started seeking out environments where I wasn't the best person in the room. I sat quietly in workshops, listened more than I spoke, took notes like a student even when I was the one being introduced as the expert. Because here's the truth. The higher you go, the less real feedback you get. People get scared. They flatter. They filter. And your growth suffers. So you have to become your own critic, your own editor, your own coach. You have to stop asking, "Did they like it?" and start asking, "Did it matter?" One more joke. I once sent a draft to a brutally honest friend who replied, "This is fine, like eating plain oatmeal with no spoon." Brutal, but correct. I rewrote the whole thing that night. If it doesn't sting a little, it's probably not helping. You don't need everyone to like your work. You need the right people to help you refine it. So welcome the feedback. Hang it up. Print it out. Let it sharpen you until praise becomes irrelevant and progress becomes automatic. That's the real flex. There's a weird hierarchy of needs they don't teach in school, but you figure it out fast when you're chasing something big. It goes like this: sleep, food, sex, power, in that exact order. Mess up the order and you spiral. Honor it and everything starts to click. I learned that the hard way by doing it backward. When I started this journey, I didn't care about sleep. I wore exhaustion like a badge. For hours last night, I'd brag, sipping lukewarm coffee like it was champagne. But here's the truth. I was dumb. Tired dumb. Human intelligence fact. 1 night of sleep deprivation reduces your working memory, focus, and decision-making abilities to the level of someone legally drunk. So yeah, I was trying to build a rocket ship with the brain function of a frat boy on a Tuesday. Not ideal. I finally snapped out of it after forgetting the pin to my own phone. Twice. In 1 day. After that, I fixed sleep first. Blackout curtains. No screens after 9 p.m. Magnesium. Earplugs. Total hermit mode. I treated my bedtime like an appointment with a billionaire mentor because, in a way, it was Then came food. I realized I wasn't eating. I was just grazing like a distracted squirrel. Chips here, coffee there, maybe a sad banana. The gut produces about 95% of the body's serotonin. That's the feel-good neurotransmitter. So yeah, that meal you skipped, that was your mood budget for the day. I started treating meals like rituals. Cooked slowly. Ate sitting down.
No screens.
Just chewing and thinking and reintroducing myself to broccoli. Then came the big one, sex. Not just the act, but the energy. I didn't realize how much of my brain was occupied with craving, fantasizing, swiping, scrolling. And all that noise? It was siphoning power. So I unplugged. Cold turkey. No dating apps. No late-night thirst traps. I started channeling that energy into building, writing, stretching. Not metaphorically stretching. Like, literally stretching on a yoga mat because I couldn't trust myself with my phone at night. People don't talk about this enough. But creative energy and sexual energy? Same battery. When I stopped leaking it on distractions, my productivity went into freak mode. I was finishing tasks I'd been putting off for months. Ideas came quicker. Sleep got deeper. I felt sharper, like my brain had lost 10 pounds of static. And then there's power. Not power over people. Power within yourself. The kind that hums under your skin when you know you're in control. There's an open academic debate about whether personal power is more biological or social nature versus nurture. I think it's built through patterns, repetition, boundaries, self-respect. Because once you master those first three, sleep, food, sex, you stop being reactive. And that's when power shows up. Power is what happens when you stop begging your body to function and start commanding it like a ship you know inside out. I remember a morning where I woke up, no alarm, fully rested, ate oatmeal, did a quiet workout, didn't check my phone, and I felt invincible, not rich, not famous, just powerful in that invisible way that makes you walk differently. No one notices right away. You don't glow, you don't levitate, but you do stop explaining yourself. People start sensing it. They pause when you speak. They mirror your energy. You're no longer flailing through your own day, you're orchestrating it. And it all started with that boring hierarchy. Sleep, food, sex, power. Another thing I learned, craving is just a signal. It's not truth. You can crave junk food, a text from someone who's bad for you, or a 2-hour nap, and none of those are requirements. The power isn't in satisfying the craving. It's in surviving it without breaking stride. Because once you realize you don't need a dopamine hit every 10 minutes, you get access to the deep work. That's where the magic is, the layer beneath the noise. I created a rule. Nothing enters my body unless it improves my energy. That includes food, media, people, and yes, impulses. And when I started living by that, I didn't just get more done. I started liking myself again. I felt capable, clear, unapologetic. You don't need to optimize everything. But if you neglect the basics, you'll spend your whole life compensating with hacks. Fix your fuel. Protect your sleep. Honor your energy. And stop giving it to every flashing light that says, look over here. That's the root system of success. The part no one sees. The part that keeps everything else upright when storms hit. And they will hit. But when you're fed, rested, focused, and clear, you don't flinch. You bend, you flex, and then you rise. You'll probably have to break your own heart. Not because you want to, but because no one else will. And if you're serious about becoming who you're meant to be, there's no way around it. The version no one tells you was, part of success means killing the person you thought you'd be. For me, that person was comfortable, clever, and just talented enough to get attention, but not disciplined enough to do anything extraordinary. That version loved potential more than process. And worse, that version wanted to be liked more than to be true. So yeah, I had to break up with him. And it felt like a betrayal. Because that version of me had carried me this far. Kept me safe. Made people laugh at parties. Knew how to read a room, not shake it. But evolution requires ego death. You can't hold onto your old identity and reach for your next one. That's not transformation, that's costume. Human intelligence certainty. Identity is fluid, but we cling to our labels like they're lifeboats. I'm not a morning person. I'm bad with money. I'm just not creative. None of those things are facts. They're habits dressed up as personality traits. I had to confront all of mine, one by one. There was a dream I carried since I was a kid, something I thought would define me. I chased it hard, put in years, sacrificed sleep, relationships, weekends, and one day, I realized I didn't want it anymore, not because I was afraid, but because I had outgrown it. And that broke my heart. Open academic debate. Is quitting a goal failure or adaptation? Some researchers say persistence is key. Others argue that strategic abandonment is a mark of intelligence. I say it depends on whether the goal still fits the shape of your soul. This one didn't, so I let it go. Quietly. No grand announcement. Just stopped feeding it. Let it fade. Letting go of that dream felt like mourning a version of me that never got to exist. I grieved for him, but I didn't resurrect him. Instead, I started writing a new version. One that wasn't rooted in nostalgia, but in now. That meant making brutal edits to my life. Saying no to things that once defined me. Distancing myself from people who only loved the old draft. I remember looking in the mirror, again. Yes, the mirror's back. And saying, "You're not that guy anymore." And for a second, I felt disoriented. Like I'd lost the map. But sometimes losing the map is the only way to stop retracing the same path. Joke break? I once updated my LinkedIn bio to reflect my new direction. Stared at it for 20 minutes. And whispered, "Who is this person?" I didn't recognize myself, but I respected the upgrade. You know, it's time to evolve when your current identity starts to feel like a performance. When your success starts tasting like stale popcorn. When the applause sounds like background noise instead of music. That's when you know. The old dream has expired. And killing it won't be easy. You'll hesitate. You'll stall. You'll try to resuscitate it with a new logo or a fresh batch of optimism. But eventually you'll have to bury it. Not because it wasn't good, but because you've become better. The scariest part of growth is not the new. It's the space between the old and what's next. That hollow, humming moment where you're not sure who you are anymore. That's the part no one celebrates. The heartbreak before the breakthrough. The silence between the chapters. I sat in that silence for weeks.
No clarity. No certainty.
Just this aching knowing. This version of me is finished. And what came next wasn't a new plan. It was a new pace. A new posture. A new kind of hunger. I stopped trying to be perfect. Started trying to be real. Stopped chasing recognition. Started chasing resonance. That's when I knew. The heartbreak had worked. It had carved space inside me that something new could fill. One last joke? I once tried to write a eulogy for my old dream just to get closure. I ended up writing a grocery list halfway through. Guess closure isn't always poetic. Sometimes it's just pragmatic. So if you're standing at the edge of a dream that no longer fits, don't wait for it to collapse on its own. Break it yourself. Gently, lovingly, but firmly, because something better is trying to be born, and it needs the room. No one talks about the eerie silence after the win. You think the hard part is the climb, but the strange part is what happens after you reach the top, look around, and realize there's no music.
No fireworks.
Just air. I hit the goal. The one I thought would fix everything. Money came in. Recognition trickled through. A few people I looked up to finally said, "Nice job." And then, nothing. No internal fanfare. No moment of euphoric rebirth. Just me, standing in my apartment, holding a phone, and realizing I was more exhausted than proud. It's a weird letdown. No one warns you. You spend so long fantasizing about making it that you forget to ask, what happens next? And the truth is, after the win, the real work begins. Because now you've got something to protect, something to maintain, something people expect from you. Human intelligence tidbit. Dopamine spikes when you anticipate a reward, not when you receive it. That's why the chase feels more electric than the catch. So when the goal was met, I didn't feel finished. I felt lost. Like a racehorse still galloping even though the race had ended. That's when the dangerous questions creep in. Was this even worth it? Is this all there is? Why do I still feel empty? I sat with those questions like uninvited house guests. Couldn't ignore them. Couldn't evict them. Just had to let them sit on the couch and stare at me while I tried to figure out what came next. Open academic debate. Does success create lasting fulfillment? Or does it simply reveal your internal voids more clearly? I can't answer for everyone. But for me, success didn't fill the hole. It just lit it up. You touch something bigger, and suddenly the ordinary feels too tight. I stopped posting updates. Stopped checking numbers. For a full week, I just walked around like a ghost with a checklist. Because achieving the goal didn't complete me. It just revealed that I had been treating milestones like medicine. They weren't. So I did what felt counterintuitive. I started over. New notebook. New routine. New question. What matters now? Because here's the twist. Just because the work changes doesn't mean it stops. Success doesn't exempt you from growth, it demands more of it. Quietly, you don't get to coast. You get to deepen. I stopped chasing the next big thing and started refining the current thing. Took my systems apart. Examined every gear. Asked, is this necessary? 100 times. And in that, I found a strange kind of peace. I wasn't driven by hunger anymore. I was driven by craft. The obsession stopped being about making it. It became about making it better. I remember reorganizing my workspace down to the last paperclip. Not because I'm type A, but because when the noise stops, you crave clarity. You crave precision. I once spent an hour deciding which font to use on a document I didn't even need to share. And it didn't feel like a waste of time. Felt like art. But here's the thing, when the outside gets quiet, your inner world gets loud. I started listening to it closely, and it told me that the next version of success wouldn't be louder. It would be quieter, more internal. I started measuring wins in terms of energy, clarity, and alignment. Did I feel good about how I used my time today? Did I contribute something real or just move data around? Did I avoid drama, noise, and the lure of look at me syndrome? Because after the win, you realize the applause fades fast. And what you're left with is yourself, your habits, your thoughts, your stillness. If you hate those things, no win will fix you. So yeah, the real work begins after the win. That's when the lights go off. The crowd leaves, and you finally have the room to ask, what kind of life am I building? When no one's watching, and you better have an answer, because without one, success feels hollow. Like reaching the top of a mountain and realizing you left your soul at the bottom. So breathe, reset, reorganize, recommit. The goal isn't to win once. It's to stay winning quietly from the inside out. No one tells you that you'll lose people along the way. Not in a dramatic soap opera kind of way, but in the quiet, almost imperceptible way where one day they stop calling, stop asking, stop seeing you. You're told to expect sacrifices. Time, money, comfort, sure. But what they don't mention is the human toll. The friends who drift. The relationships that wilt. The family members who squint at you sideways, wondering what exactly you're becoming. I didn't plan to lose anyone. I just changed. Slowly. Imperceptibly at first. Then like a tide pulling away from shore. The first time I really noticed it was at a birthday party. Same people I used to laugh with, eat with, text memes to. But I felt foreign. They were talking about shows I didn't watch, complaints I didn't share, gossip I didn't care about. I smiled. I nodded. But inside, I felt like a cardboard cutout of myself propped up in the wrong room. That's when I realized growth creates distance. It's not personal. It's gravitational. When you start orbiting a different planet, you stop sharing the same sky. Sometimes you still love them deeply. But love isn't always enough to maintain alignment. Human intelligence fact. The brain's default mode network, activated when we rest or daydream, is heavily shaped by the people we spend the most time with. Change your circle and you literally change your inner world. And changing that circle? It hurts. There's an open academic debate about whether human connection is more vital than personal ambition. Some say we're wired for tribe above all. Others argue solitude is the key to innovation. But what happens when your ambition takes you away from your tribe? You mourn. Silently. I didn't write long goodbye texts. Didn't post cryptic Instagram captions. I just stopped hearing from certain people. And at first, I blamed myself. Was I being too distant? Too intense? Too focused? But then I remembered the mirror. The discipline. The edge I was sharpening every day. I wasn't wrong. I was growing. And not everyone wants to grow with you. I started to understand that. Deeply. Painfully. And it wasn't just friends. One day, I realized I hadn't spoken to a relative in months. Not because of a fight. Just misalignment. They'd stopped asking questions about my life. I'd stopped asking about theirs. Not out of malice, just difference. That's the part no one dares to say. Some losses feel like failure, even when they're part of success. You'll lose people. Not all at once. Not in a headline-grabbing way. But over time, like fog thinning in the sun. You'll reach for your phone and realize no one texted back. You'll hit a milestone and hesitate to share it because you already know the group chat won't understand, or worse, they'll respond with silence. I didn't get angry. I just closed the chat and went back to work. Because if you need applause to keep going, you won't go far. That's what the losses taught me. They made me stronger, sharper, and yes, more selective. I stopped trying to save relationships out of nostalgia. I started building new ones on shared now, not shared then. And the new ones? They were different, quieter, but deeper. No small talk, just mutual respect, mutual grind, mutual evolution. I didn't need 10 people who kind of got me. I needed 2 who really did. One night, I wrote down every person I had lost touch with, and next to each name, I wrote one thing they taught me. A little ritual of closure. Some names made me cry. Some made me laugh. One made me feel nothing. And when I was done, I folded the paper in half and put it away. Not gone. Just complete. That's how I moved forward. With respect for the past. But my eyes facing forward. If you're here, if you're building something that feels bigger than you, just know this. You will lose people you love. And you will survive it. You will grieve. And then you will grow again. Because every person who exits creates space. And space is what greatness needs. So don't chase those who stopped walking with you. Don't beg for a seat at the table you've already outgrown. Keep moving. Keep building. Keep loving them silently from the distance your growth required. That's not disloyalty. That's maturity. Your enemies are just mirrors. I didn't believe that at first. I used to think enemies were the villains, the haters, the trolls, the doubters. I'd imagine them like movie characters, wearing trench coats and whispering, "You'll never make it." But turns out they're rarely that obvious. Most of the time, your enemies look like coworkers, old friends, or people scrolling past your progress with tight-lipped silence. And the weirdest part? They teach you more than your mentors ever could. There's a reason we react so strongly to certain people. Something about them pokes a bruise we didn't know we had. That criticism that makes your skin crawl? That's not about them. That's about what part of you hasn't healed yet. That's what I had to face. My first enemy was someone who once praised me, told me I had potential, then turned cold, disengaged. When I asked why, they said, "I just don't buy what you're selling anymore." That line haunted me, not because it was harsh, but because it echoed, over and over. And then I realized, I didn't fully buy what I was selling yet. They had simply voiced the doubt I hadn't dealt with. We project our insecurities onto others faster than we process them internally. Our emotional radar is often tuned to pick up on familiar shadows, not objective threats. So the people I saw as enemies, they weren't blocking me. They were reflecting me. There's an open academic debate on whether rivalry fuels innovation or undermines self-esteem. Me? I say it depends on how you respond. Resentment is a leash. Reflection is a ladder. I chose the latter. There was someone who copied my work. Word for word. Style, tone, even the pacing of my sentences. At first, I was furious. Then I asked, why does this bother me so much? Because deep down, I didn't think I was original enough to be worth copying. There it was again, me staring back at me through someone else's imitation. Once I saw it like that, the anger drained out. I stopped feeling attacked and started feeling aware. Enemies reveal where your armor is thin. They show you what part of your identity still needs anchoring. And sometimes they're not even enemies. They're just doing their thing. You're the one reading it as a threat. That realization saved me so much energy. Instead of clapping back, I started journaling. Why did this comment trigger me? What fear is this person highlighting? Where do I still need to grow to make this irrelevant? Because that's the real flex, not proving them wrong, but making them irrelevant. I thanked them, silently. Every person who doubts you hands you a shovel. You can either bury your confidence with it, or dig deeper into your truth. And when you dig deep enough, even your rivals start looking like unpaid consultants. No one will tell you that enemies are shortcuts to self-knowledge. They fast-track the questions mentors are too polite to ask. Are you secure in your message? Do you actually believe what you're building? Would you keep going if no one clapped? Those questions don't come from friends. They come from tension, from friction, from the heat of being watched, doubted, tested. But you need that heat to forge something strong. I stopped fearing criticism the moment I realized it was a mirror. Because you can't fix what you don't see. And enemies, whether real or imagined, make you see. They're annoying, but they're useful. They're petty, but they're precise. They show you where you're still performing instead of embodying. And once you stop trying to impress them, once you truly stop needing their approval, you start building with a different kind of fire. The kind that doesn't need applause. The kind that doesn't dim when someone doubts it. The kind that knows exactly who it is and why it's here. That's the moment the mirror shatters. Because once you own all the reflections, good, bad, and messy, there's nothing left for your enemies to hold over you. And that's freedom. It's not about the dream. It never was. That realization didn't come to me during a meditation or in some peak moment of clarity. It came while cleaning my kitchen. Wiping crumbs off a counter I hadn't seen in 3 days because I was too busy chasing the goal. The dream had been loud, flashy, inspiring. But the person I was becoming in the pursuit of that dream, that was the part that mattered. At some point, the outcome started to feel secondary. I didn't even notice the shift at first. But gradually, I cared less about the win and more about who I had to become to even stay in the game. I used to think goals were maps. Now I know they're mirrors. You say you want something: success, love, freedom, impact, but what you're really signing up for is the transformation required to hold it. Neuroplasticity doesn't stop in childhood. Your brain literally rewires itself when you act out new patterns consistently. That's the science of becoming. Started small for me. I was no longer okay with sloppy work, with lateness, with saying, "I'll try," when I meant, "I probably won't." The old version of me, the one who needed reminders, who loved the fantasy more than the plan, he started fading. Not all at once, just in pieces, like skin you grow out of. There's an open academic debate about whether personality is fixed or malleable. Some psychologists argue you can't fundamentally change who you are. But I've met too many people who evolved in ways they never thought possible. The truth is, your personality isn't fixed. It's protected. Protected by old beliefs. Protected by old stories. And when you stop protecting it, it starts to change. At one point, I found an old video of myself talking about my dream life, and I winced. Not because it was embarrassing, okay, it was, but because I realized I no longer even wanted what that version of me did. He was chasing freedom. I was building discipline. He wanted ease. I'd learned to crave effort. He was obsessed with being seen. I just wanted to see clearly. And I realized the dream hadn't changed. You grow into what matters. What starts as ego becomes curiosity. What starts as fantasy becomes focus. What starts as hustle becomes habit. I'm not saying dreams are useless. They're essential. But only if they're treated like scaffolding, not shrines. Because dreams are not destinations. They're launch pads. You're not supposed to arrive, you're supposed to outgrow them. And maybe that's the most humbling part of all this. You spend years chasing a version of success only to arrive and whisper, "This isn't what I thought it would be." And that's not failure. That's evolution. The goal was never just to make money, build something, become someone. The goal was to become someone who no longer needs any of that to feel whole. That's the gift buried inside the grind. I started finding joy in the smallest things, closing my laptop after a deep work sprint, hearing silence after deleting a distracting app, being alone in a clean space with no one to impress. That's when I knew the dream had done its job, because it's not about the yacht, or the six-figure launch, or the spotlight. It's about walking through fire and realizing you're no longer flammable. It's about trading applause for alignment, hype for harmony, performance for peace. And look, maybe your dream will come true. But I promise you, if you're really doing the work, it won't feel like the dream by the time you get there. You'll be too different, too grounded, too real. So chase it. Absolutely. But be ready to let it go when you need to, because who you become while chasing it, that's the actual win. No one will ever fully understand you. That's not pessimism. It's reality. And weirdly, it's kind of beautiful once you stop fighting it. In the beginning, I thought I was just bad at explaining myself. I tried to describe the fire inside, the reason I kept building, skipping parties, saying no to perfectly good distractions. I wanted people to get it, to nod and say, "Ah, I see what you're doing. That makes sense." But they didn't, and they won't, because how could they? They weren't there when I sat up at 3 a.m. in a quiet apartment asking myself if I was wasting my life. They didn't feel the tremble in my fingers the first time I shared something real. They didn't see the weeks I worked without proof. They didn't see me flinch at my own reflection. People don't understand what they didn't have to survive. And eventually I stopped needing them to. We are evolutionarily wired to seek belonging, tribal connection. But what we rarely talk about is that true growth often requires you to stand outside the tribe, at least for a while. The pursuit of something original makes you a little alien. Not better, just untranslatable. There's an open academic debate about whether self-actualization is inherently isolating. Some argue it's the highest form of freedom. Others say it's the loneliest. I think it's both. The point is, when you stop expecting understanding, you start giving yourself permission to be misunderstood. That's freedom. I used to overshare, hoping to bridge the gap. I'd send long texts, voice notes, metaphors, trying to explain the shifts happening inside me, trying to bring people with me. Now, I just let the silence speak. One day, someone said, "You've changed." I said, "Thank you." They frowned. I smiled. That was the whole exchange. When you know what you're doing and why, the need to explain disappears. You stop defending your pace. Stop apologizing for your intensity. Stop softening your truth for palatability. You just walk, and the right ones will find you along the path. Not because you shouted louder, but because your energy became too unmistakable to ignore. That's your job. And when you finally get to that place, where you know who you are without the need for consensus, it feels like stepping into air after years underwater. You don't need to be understood. You need to be true. There's this calm that shows up when you let go of the fantasy that someone else will fully get you. Because here's the twist. Even you won't fully understand yourself. You're a moving target, a shifting story, an ongoing experiment. And that's okay, because life isn't about being fully known. It's about being fully present, fully aligned. The rest? Bonus. So if you've made it this far, through the discipline, the discomfort, the quiet losses, the glowing up, the glowing alone, congratulations. You've met yourself. And no one else needs to understand that for it to be real. You're still here. That says something. It says you're not just curious, you're committed. It says you felt that strange ache to be better, stronger, more you. And you stayed through the silences, the tension, the punchlines, and the hard truths. Let's slow this down now. The lights are dimming. The pace softens. Because you've heard enough words for now. What matters most isn't what you remember from this, but what lingers. That image of you in front of the mirror. That quiet kitchen after a win. That strange, sacred distance that growth carves between you and the old world. Hold those close, because you're going to need them when the noise comes back. When people question your path. When the dopamine fades and the work still asks for more, you'll be tempted to explain yourself. Don't. You'll be tempted to shrink. Don't. Just keep going. Quietly, relentlessly, with a softness that protects your flame. There is no map, no final form, just you becoming, again and again. And if no one claps for you today, let this be the applause. A whisper at the end of the road. You did well. You are not alone. You are becoming something beautiful.